The fader hit. This is all my fault. I hit the wrong button. So just take it away.
We are joined by Representative Leigh Finke. Hi, Leigh.
And of course, the rookie.
Set fader on stun, will you?
Here we go.
Okay.
Leigh, you brought two people with you.
Yeah,
Am I paying for them?
probably. There are staff members that work at the Capitol.
All right, and you are in session.
We are not session.
Not yet. No, you're
session
coming
starts
up.
January 14th.
Coming up.
Yes.
And I wanted to say, despite your notoriety for a variety of transgender issues, you are on the Environment and Natural Resources Committee. Mm-hmm. You're on the Human Services Committee.
Yep.
Is that correct? Judiciary, Finance, and Civil Law, and Legacy Finance.
Yes.
What is Legacy Finance?
Legacy is a committee where we spend the funds that are created by the Land, Water, and Legacy ballot measure that was passed in 2008 or so, in which we collect money specifically for the protection of water, land, and our cultural heritage.
All right.
It's a very fun committee.
How did you manage to get yourself into a fight with Martina Navratilova?
I did nothing, and she tweeted about it. I was on NewsHour. There has been a lot of attention on our community, and that attention is growing. So I did a few media hits, and she tweeted about one of them.
And what did she tweet? What did you say that she found controversial?
So in the interview that I had done on PBS NewsHour, we were talking about the attacks against Congresswoman Sarah McBride, our first member of Congress elected to the U.S. House, and the attacks that she is facing. And we were talking about the bathroom bans, basically, that are going in. And I had remarked about how there's not evidence that trans inclusion is a risk to cisgender women. And then that's what she was tweeting about.
And you said she's a TERF, T-E-R-F. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, that's trans exclusionary radical feminist.
Oh.
It's a historical term for feminists who do not include trans people in their...
On transgendering children. Or maybe we don't disagree.
I don't know yet.
Okay. I don't think children should be recruited or proselytized about gender confusion, at least until they're in their teens. Is that reasonable?
No, that is a statement from which I would disagree on almost every premise. I don't think anyone's either recruiting or proselytizing.
All
I think
right.
that there are kids who are trans, and those kids exist and deserve to be treated with dignity.
But can they be trans in your estimation at any age?
Well, that's not really a question that makes sense to me as a trans person. Like, there isn't the notion of what it means to be trans at this age versus that age. Like, trans people are just trans, and we transition at different ages. We have different environments and cultural and social environments, and the times at which we live, and authentically become ourselves.
Let me simplify.
It's different. Like,
let me simplify
what you're asking, then yes, you can be trans.
I'll simplify it. A 3-year-old, in my estimation, could not possibly know whether he or she was trans.
I mean, I'm not in a position to answer that question. That's a question for our families and their doctors. People aren't transitioning at 3 in a meaningful sense. But
when did you transition?
As an adult.
Oh. And had you thought about it growing up?
Yes.
You're a graduate of Maple Grove High School, which you attended as a male. Were you on any sports teams?
No.
So you weren't going Roll Tide or Crimson?
No.
Okay.
So you transitioned at what age?
Well, that's also a difficult conversation. I think
Okay.
that most of the questions that are being asked of trans people, they really come from a misconception about what it means to be a person who is trans. Trans people are 1% of the country, and we have a vast, diverse experience of our identities and our transitions. When I was about 15, who I was really started to make itself known. That was 1990s. It was Maple Grove. There were no LGBTQ people in my life. I had no idea how to make sense of the person I was or what I was experiencing. So I tried to get out. I tried to figure that out. I didn't have the tools. So after about a year of that, I sort of shelved that. And then it wasn't until my 30s that it became undeniable and had to be confronted.
Were your parents comforting to you?
At which stage?
15.
Well, I mean, I did not address this. I did not come from a family where I would have talked to my family about being trans.
Do you now?
I do now. Yeah, it was hard.
Yeah.
But I do now.
And are they accepting now?
Yeah.
Do you have siblings? Mm-hmm. Are they
Yeah.
accepting of
Yeah.
you? And so you have your family's intact. You see them and talk to them.
Yeah, I mean, it was hard. It's hard. You know, what we go through. I think one of the misconceptions also is that people who are not trans think of trans people as a man in a dress, and it's very offensive, and it dismisses years and years of hardship and therapy and healthcare and work and suffering. What it cost me to go from the person I was to the person I am now is intense and serious. I have a whole phase of my life. I call it the dark years. I'm sober now. I have gone through hell to be able to be myself. So when we talk about trans people like they are just like people who threw a dress on and want to go into the bathroom, it's not just wrong, it's incredibly disrespectful to me as a person.
Do you think transgendered is the term transgendered men? Is that the correct term?
For not for me, I'm a trans woman.
Okay. Should a trans woman be allowed to compete against biological females in sports?
Are you talking about adults or youth?
Adults.
I think it's really up to the sport. I think trans inclusion is not nearly the threat that we consider it to be. There are a handful of fairly good trans people who have competed recently and gotten a lot of attention. You know, Leah Thomas got a lot of attention for being a pretty good swimmer who won one race, but by no means dominant in that sport.
Well,
I think it's really
lousy male swimmer, but when she began competing against females, she was better.
she became medium.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that, one, the number of people who are trying to compete is vastly overblown, and two, the risk is wildly miscalculated. And I think that we can kind of see that in the sense of like people say things about trans women playing sports that don't make sense in terms of like, I don't know, why are trans women banned from billiards against women?
Well, I think that's silly.
It is. And chess and darts and, you know, all of the things that like you have to accept as your default position that men are somehow superior in every way to women to sort of go down the road that's happening. Like there are a few trans people who are participating in sports, and I think they should be allowed to. I think the risk is extremely overblown. But I do also think it's reasonable for the NCAA and the Olympics and places to have individual rules for individual circumstances.
I do too, and I think in sports of endurance or strength, trans men should not be allowed to compete against women.
Trans women should not be allowed to compete.
Right.
Are you okay with chess?
Chess, I'm cool
Okay,
with.
let's
That's not a-
lay
Well,
off chess. Go ahead.
We should go
Marbles.
ahead and let the chess associations know trans women are not a threat.
I don't think it's a threat, no. But men are born with testosterone and women aren't.
I mean, sort of.
Well,
I mean, there's
it's
a
not
whole
sort
lot
of. It's a pretty good scientific fact that biological children coming out of the womb have testosterone. Well, it doesn't kick in really till 12, but they have testosterone. Biological women do not. Testosterone results in completely different bodies, stronger hearts, bigger lungs, more endurance, longer limbs, narrower hips, on and on and on, which would make them prevail over women, most generally speaking, in, say, bicycle racing, swimming, boxing.
I think sort of that's true. I think it's more complicated than that, which is why we see a lot of, for example, we see a lot of black women who are not trans being attacked by people like J.K. Rowling, and they are specifically non-transgender women who have high testosterone because that's real. Right. The problem that when we go down the road that you're putting forward, the problem is how do you know? how do you know? And while many people who are on the opposition, they say, we always know, the truth is you do not know.
Well, in the Olympics, you'd know through a blood test.
I mean, no, this happened in the Olympics twice this time, right? It doesn't matter that the boxer who is not transgender, who won the boxing, has been vilified across the globe for being a man. And that's wrong. And it's hurting women who are cis because people think, well, that can't be a woman. She's too good at boxing. And it's simple biology that what you have said is too narrow a perspective to encapsulate gender.
Well, how can it be? You're asking me to disbelieve my own eyes.
No, I've done no such thing. I don't care what you believe. I'm saying specifically gender and sex is more complicated than the sentence that you put forward about women versus men.
What if, and this will never happen, what if teams were assembled and they could include men and women, but the criteria for joining the team is only the best players make the team? In other words, for swimming, maybe it would be the time in the 100-yard butterfly, the 10 best times make the team. That would probably exclude a lot of women.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I don't know a lot about athletics. I know that there are really smart sports advocates in the Twin Cities I'd love to have you speak to. I don't know anything about sports in terms of how or why the teams are what they are. What I do know is that segregating trans people out of spaces creates a great harm for us. Also, these conversations completely ignore that there are trans men. And what do we do with trans men in every one of these situations, or non-binary people who exist, who have, their own journeys?
What then more accurately would be the focus of your activism? Because you're undeniably an activist.
Yeah, I'm an activist for trans rights.
Okay, what rights are you thinking that you need to fight for?
Well, I will tell you this. I didn't run for office to inject trans ideology into the conversation. I ran in 2022 after a coordinated national movement was born in 2016 to eliminate the rights of trans people. Before 2016, trans people had always existed. We had always used the bathroom. We had always participated in culture. You may or may not have known that was true, but nothing changed except for our rights became a target. So now what we are doing as a movement, we are saying we deserve right to health care uninterrupted as we have always had it. Right? We're not trying to change anything. I haven't protected gender-affirming care in Minnesota. Gender-affirming care is illegal in Minnesota. What I'm doing is protecting people who have had their health care removed. Right? We did not do this. We did not center ourselves into a national political conversation about whether or not we should survive. We have always lived. And so now I am in the position I am, and the 25 or so other trans people in their state governments who are defending our rights because we had them and we are losing them.
Do you fear Trump's election?
Of course.
What do you think you'd lose?
I mean, yesterday they passed the NDAA, which will take away healthcare access for the 30 to 60,000 trans people who are family members of the military. We are going to see a direct attack against healthcare access for minors and then healthcare access for adults.
By healthcare, what do you mean for minors? What healthcare?
All healthcare, transition-related care, mental health care. Our health care is health care in the same...
It's not all health care. If it's a minor who has chicken pox, they're going to get waited on, right?
Yes, I understand that. What I mean is that when people talk about gender-affirming care, they talk about it as though it is not health care that is a part of the landscape of health care that we receive, right? So a child who has gender dysphoria, who receives mental health therapy, will lose that access to mental health therapy.
Now we're back to trying to determine an age where that would be.
I
I am, because that would have to have a bearing on it.
Do you think that person should not have access to therapy?
Well,
even if you don't want them to transition, that's gender-affirming care, and that child needs support, and they will lose access to that care.
Well, by that standard, every parent of a 5-year-old would have their kid in therapy because a 5-year-old thinks he's a fire truck.
No, that's wrong.
No, it isn't wrong. I've been around them all my life. Well, I've been around children all my life. And at the age of 5,
it's an insulting question. I'm not going to go down that road.
How is it insulting?
We're not trucks.
No, I didn't
We
say
are
you
humans
were.
who have identities that are valid.
But as a 5-year-old, they don't know
It's not the
about
same.
their humanity growing up.
That's wrong.
Yeah. No, it isn't. I've seen it. Have you seen it?
Yes.
How?
I've got children.
You have your own children.
Of course. But I have a whole ass life, y'all. I'm not just
Well,
a
fill
carrot.
us in on those
I don't
dark
want to
years.
talk about my life.
Well,
I
let
don't
me
want your listeners
let me go
to
down
have
this
my
road
life.
about the healthcare because my wife has worked in healthcare for close to 20 years. And I think one of the things that there's confusion is what you're talking about somewhat can be classified as elective care and surgery, as opposed to what Joe mentioned, which is like chicken pox is considered, I'm
Sure.
not using the word mainstream, but you know what I'm saying, like dealing with health-related issues. This is more of an elective type of care. Would that be correct?
No, it wouldn't be correct. It would be treatment for gender dysphoria is necessary health care according to all major medical associations, right? When you are in a position to access transition-related health care, you are doing so because it is no longer elective.
Leigh, you have children. I know you don't want to talk about your life, but that's wonderful. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
What are those dark years? Where were you? What were you doing?
Well, I mean, I try not to talk about my personal life because I am turned into a caricature and I receive a lot of threats and harassment and
Well,
stalking.
wouldn't that mitigate your caricaturization?
No, it would put my family at risk.
Oh.
And so I have
That's
children.
understandable. Yeah, that's
I have
understandable.
children. I love them very much. The most important part of my political advocacy in the world is stable housing, good paying jobs, and access to health care. That's what I think trans liberation is about. Nobody calls me because they want to talk about my policy priorities. I am involved in the activism for my community out of necessity. And what it means for me to do this work is to be willing to expose myself to people who I mean, the joke about me having staff here is that you're paying for them, but the reality is that I don't go places alone.
Well, considering what happened lately in the news, you're probably wise.
Yeah.
But just so equally, he would rip anybody that brought staff in here,
Yeah,
Republican,
I just
Democrat.
gave you some tax grief.
I don't care. That's fine. But it's also important for me to sort of acknowledge the reality of being out, you know, like we didn't choose this to be the environment in which we're working.
See, my view has always been I don't care. You be what you want to be. I just think that, and you yourself admitted it, that we're dealing with 1% of the population, which gets an undue amount of attention. The trans movement, if that's the correct term, gets an incredible amount of attention. There was a piece in the Star Tribune the other day about a woman in state of Washington who so fears the Trump administration, she's stockpiling medicine and she has a kayak ready to go. She thinks she's going to kayak her way to Canada. I don't know why she just wouldn't drive, but I think the attention is just, and I would imagine your defense of that is that you would need the attention.
No, we don't want the attention. We need it now, right? We nothing had to change. We could have continued to be ourselves without all of this attention, and we would have, as a movement, I think I can say we would have preferred not to be in the position we are, but now it is the re-election of a president who has made it clear that his desire is for our legal access to protection, to health care, to dignity, is to be removed, right? So now we are in a position where we have no choice but to ring the bell. None of this has happened because trans people wanted the attention. This specifically happened as a result of the coordinated movement. There's a quote from a man who was one of the leaders in the anti-trans movement in 2015 who said that after they lost marriage, they needed a new issue. They threw all the spaghetti at the wall and trans kids stuck. None of this is accidental. None of this is necessary. It is a deliberate decision from people who want to attack trans people. That was 9 years ago, and now we're here, and we are going to see an immense amount of harm done to our community because of the election of Trump.
Principally, you think, in healthcare.
Yes, I mean, I think that's where it will start. I think it will go beyond that.
What could there be beyond that? I mean, you're an elected official of a state. What's the problem? Who's going to hold you back?
I mean,
You haven't been held back.
I would say that having one representative in the state of Minnesota has been a really important part of our success in this state. I mean, I don't. I mean, I.
But fine. But who's held you back?
I think that what you are trying to say is that I am evidence that trans people don't face obstacles, and that would just be inherently.
Oh, we all face
problem.
obstacles. Big deal. Who has held you back? Look what you've achieved. Who's held you back?
I have been very lucky and very privileged.
Some people are lucky and privileged.
Yeah, they are.
It doesn't make any difference if you're trans or not trans.
So you don't think that there is anything holding back trans people? Is that really the
I don't know
case
what
you're
your
making?
burdens have been. I don't know that your burdens are any more significant than anyone else's.
I don't think that my burdens are. I think that collectively, when you take 1% of the population and you put a magnifying glass on their rights and systematically try to remove them, you are not talking about the individual person. You are talking about the community.
I'm unaware of anyone trying to remove trans people from anything.
Well, you're not a part of the conversation then. I mean, there is a very
Well, it's
clear...
a conversation held by 1% of the population. It
is
stands
not.
to reason I wouldn't be a part of it.
It is not. We are not holding the conversation. People in the incoming Trump administration have explicitly said that their goal is to eradicate transgender people from public life.
But I think, Leigh,
I don't think that'll happen.
If you were to pose that same question to the
but it will
vast
do
majority
hurt.
of the American public, I think they would say most people just kind of want to be left alone.
I would love that to be
You know what I
true.
mean? I think they're everyone's in agreement to that regard. Don't
They're
you think?
not in agreement because I agree with you, but I think that if that were to be the case, we would not have law after law being passed to take away health care, to take away even the idea that a trans kid should read a book in which they are represented. They're taking away our ability to change our names, to be who we are in the legal world in which we live. These things are not new. None of this is new. It is just now being removed. And to say that it's not happening or it is not a threat it's to play blind to what is happening on a national targeted scale.
I haven't encountered any prevention of changing names.
Well, it's happening all over the country. People trying to change your driver's license. We're having conversations that are alarming, right? People being forcibly detransitioned. Like, it's not important to me that you all know every single thing that's happening nationally to trans people. Like, it's not a part of your lived experience, and I'm okay with that. But that doesn't mean it's not happening. And you know, you invited me on to this program to talk about trans people and the government. And I think it's important that when I am the voice of the community telling you what's happening to us, that we recognize that that's true.
Are you talking about roadblocks, filling out your driver's license and putting female instead of male?
Yeah.
Those
That's one
types
thing.
of
Gender markers are certainly, I mean, many states have already banned the ability to change your gender marker. Many states are talking about straight up revoking valid.
Not this state.
Not Minnesota, because Minnesota has built itself into, in the last 2 years, a place that trans rights are protected.
Was that your bill, the refuge bill?
Well, the refuge bill more specifically does protections for people who live outside of Minnesota who have lost access to health care.
And they can come in and be husbanded by a judge, for example.
If they need to.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, most
Is
of
there an
what
age limit on that?
most of what the trans refuge bill does is allow families who receive health care, like, for example, there are many families in Iowa who have been treating gender dysphoria, who lost access to continue receiving their prescriptions, so they drive to Minnesota to fill their prescriptions. That's most of what the trans refuge bill does. There is a jurisdictional component in which custody disputes can be heard. That's not an age limit, and that's actually not unique. There are court shopping in custody cases is very common.
Has that even happened yet in Minnesota?
No.
I didn't think so.
Yeah.
Do
Mostly
you anticipate it happening?
Not. I mean, do I think eventually somebody will have a court case over the custody of their child? Maybe. Minnesota's not unique in that in offering. When people talk about the temporary jurisdiction or custodial jurisdiction, it just means you can hear the court case in Minnesota.
I wish you wanted to talk about your life.
I mean, I wish I felt safe doing so.
There's nobody here that would harm you.
I'm not talking about people
No, she's
in
not
the
worried about.
room.
Yeah, she's not worried about us.
Well, our listeners are very kind
Joe,
and charitable.
it's for the same reason that we don't give out our address or talk. It's.
It's completely understandable.
I don't think we can go
I-
after her for that.
Well, I'm not going after anybody.
do-
I just think your life
Aggressive
is
behavior.
probably very interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
no doubt.
Here's the narrative that I give people, Joe, and I do understand that. And if I felt like people, when I talk about this, then I get attacked for being a victim and playing victim, and oh, you're so sad and everything's sad, right? Like people get banned from the Capitol because they come into the Capitol to do harm to me, right? Like it's hard to be in the position I'm in. I was a person who grew up in the 90s, 80s and 90s.
You graduated from high school in 81.
91.
I'm sorry, 91.
No, that's wrong.
Yeah, I saw
graduated
that
from
was
high
wrong.
school
Yeah.
in 99.
Yeah.
Don't put any years on
Well,
it.
then
okay?
you're younger than I thought you were because that's wrong in your bio.
My bio has some wrong things in it.
Yeah.
Is that just to throw people off?
I mean, I haven't put any of that on the internet. People are doing their best, I guess. But I graduated high school in 99. During high school and middle school, I was not like the other kids, et cetera, et cetera. I didn't have a pathway forward that I could find. I went to Bethel College. I ended up in an evangelical school because when I tried to figure out my shit, excuse me, I don't know. if
You
it's
can
allowed.
say that
It's
on a
okay.
podcast.
You're good.
I couldn't figure it out, so I went the other direction. Spent a few years in the evangelical world. I went to an evangelical college. I got married. I had kids. I love my family. I love my co-parent. We have a wonderful relationship. And eventually, like, the life I was living became a life that was not sustainable for me, up to and including very dark and difficult period of my life in which I did start having to have that conversation again. And I'll just say, when I started to learn what was happening, I was horrified, right? I wasn't excited. I wasn't jumping up and down because now I'm going to transition. It was the most disruptive thing that could have hit my life in my 30s. And nobody was looking for it, and nobody wanted it, least of all me. I told myself, you must have a brain tumor, right? You must have cancer, like something has happened to your brain. I went to therapy. I eventually got sober. I dealt honestly with what was happening in my life, and I'm here now.
You've used sober twice. Were you drinking?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And what were you feeling? What was your what was corrupting you? You had feelings, I want to do this instead of this.
No, I mean, it was depression, really. It was not so much like, oh, I've got this person in me and I'm trapped and I can't get out. It was like, I'm depressed constantly. I'm drinking too much. My life is in a bad direction. What is going on? I didn't want to. I mean, it's not unique to have buried personal trauma that you drink instead of deal with, right? It's a very common experience.
Self-medicating. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And I would not have survived to this point in my life if I had not gotten sober, and I would not have survived to this point in my life if I had not transitioned.
I want to ask you about your constituents. Can you stay with us through one more break?
Yeah.
All right, we'll be back shortly.